Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2016 Wireless Hall of Fame dinner. If you can please locate your seats, we will get underway with tonight's program. Many of you have been with us for all or most of the Wireless Hall of Fame dinners, whether as guests and especially as sponsors. Of course, tonight's event would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them. We're grateful for our bandwidth sponsors, AT&T, Eagle River, and Verizon. We also want to thank our Spectrum sponsors, our frequency sponsors, and our connection sponsors. So, again, please join me one more time in thanking them for their support. I cannot emphasize how much it means for the Wireless History Foundation. So thank you, everyone. And I want to thank each one of you for coming out this evening on the heels of Labor Day weekend. This is the official end of summer. And what a summer it has been. Tumultuous world events, presidential primaries, and the Summer Olympics. The Summer Olympics, which succeeded against long odds and was a triumph of both individual achievement and teamwork. And I think that can also be said of the story of the wireless industry. Succeeding against overwhelming odds, in the beginning at least, through individual achievement and teamwork. Each of the honorees tonight, like each of us, has faced the poet's question: what will you do with your one wild and precious life? The biographies of our honorees reflect their individual choices. But I've learned about these folks as we've gone through putting these videos together. And it's really their commitment to teamwork and partnerships that shines through. It's been a real treat to explore their stories. And I am so glad you are here this evening to have that opportunity too. Please enjoy your dinner, and we will be back shortly.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please recognize Wireless History Foundation Director Rob McCaley, CEO of MobileSphere Holdings.
Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Wireless History Foundation, I'd like to extend our warmest welcome to you all this evening. We very much appreciate your support. We have a nice cross-section of members of the Wireless Hall of Fame with us here tonight. And what I'd like to do is call their names, have them stand up, and we'll hold our recognition applause until we've got them all standing. So that way you can spot where they all are. So, Marty Cooper, Dale Hatfield, John Stanton, Brian Fonts, Arlene Harris, Wayne Perry, Craig Farrell, George Schmidt, Jan Udenfeld, John Kelly, and Larry Maushin. Would you you're all standing? Give them a big round of applause. So, the Wireless Hall of Fame is one of two programs of the Wireless History Foundation. The other program is the Digital Archives Project, which gathers and digitizes documents, objects, audio and video materials created during the course of the history of the industry. We've been very successful in amassing sufficient material at this point that we were faced with the decision of what to do about it and make it more broadly available. So, for the past several months, we've been working with Black Pixel. Black Pixel is a renowned app and web development company. The companies listed there are just a small slice of their well-known customers, and you have probably used one of their apps or accessed one of their websites in the past couple of days. Black Pixel has helped us develop profiles about the potential users and folks that would be interested in having access to the material that's in the digital archives. And so with that information, the board of directors has decided to do something with it that allows us to expand and broaden the reach of the material that we've gathered, as well as continue to collect more material to add to the collection. So we have decided to open a museum, but we're going to open a virtual museum. Consistent with the ethos of this industry about anytime, anywhere, and any device capabilities, this museum will be accessible in a way that everyone can use it on any size device and interact with some very interesting material. The technical architecture provides us for the capability to both present kind of the more standard things that you see today, but also go into the realm of much higher interactivity and virtual reality kind of presentation with the material that we have. So we're incredibly excited about presenting the story of this industry in a way that is compelling and engaging to a variety of audiences, while continuing to serve our more traditional constituencies in academia and research around the history of the industry. Now, while it's much easier to paint pixels on a screen than it is to have a street address, it still costs money. So we're going to be reaching out to some of you who have been foundational sponsors of the Wireless History Foundation to help us move this effort forward and to continue to develop this kind of capability and enrich the kind of experience that people can have in learning about this wonderful industry. Liz, the board, and I will be obviously talking about this as we go forward, but this doesn't mean that you should stop contributing to the digital archives. So as my annual pitch goes, you know what's in the attic, or maybe not, but go look there and get those boxes out, and if there's anything interesting, send it to us. Even if it's not interesting, send it to us. We'll digitize it, we'll index it, and we'll figure out whether it's interesting. So, we deeply and sincerely appreciate all of the support that you've given us over the years in terms of contributing to the Digital Archives Project, and we hope that you'll continue that. And now, I can get out of the way and we can induct some more folks into that wing of the virtual museum that will be the Wireless Hall of Fame. Thank you very much.
We do and have a golf tournament. FJ's son is an incredible, one of the highest ranked golfers in the U.S.
Very accomplished golfer. He started playing when he was in diapers, believe it or not.
And so FJ called me and said, I really want to come to this, but I want to bring my son and he's going to play in our foursome. FJ and his son and a couple other players, they won. And I have never seen FJ so proud. You saw the tremendous father, incredible family man that he was.
We are delighted to welcome the President and CEO of Sprint, Marcelo Claure.
Good evening. So quite honestly, this is something that I would have rather have done when FJ was with us. So I do this with mixed emotions. It's always a sad day when a very good friend like FJ leaves us at such an early age, at the age of 53. And at the same time, I know how proud FJ is right now watching us and basically, fulfilling one of his dreams, and that is that this whole industry honors him and inducts him into the Hall of Fame. FJ was not only an extraordinary person, but he was a very unique human being. He was an incredible entrepreneur. He was a pioneer and a driving force in our industry. It's an honor to join all of us tonight on his behalf, especially surrounded by his beautiful wife, Abby, who's here with us tonight. I believe there are certain people in our lives that we're destined to meet. In my previous company, I was always trying to chase FJ for business, and mysteriously, my company was located very close to his. A few years later, he moved, and then we happened to move very close to him. But when things got really freaky is when I bought a house that was only 5 blocks away from his house. So even like that, I could not get his business. You know, we developed quite a close relationship. I was very lucky to be one of those that FJ led into his private life. And when I started to think tonight about what should I share about FJ, I think that first of all, those who know FJ know how he always appeared to be so calm. And he always kept things under control. But for those of us who knew him, we knew that he was absolutely ferocious, he was competitive, and he was driven like very few other people I ever met. He had big dreams with big goals. He developed a plan and was absolutely amazing on never stopping until he was successful in achieving those goals. I believe that quality stood out back in 1996 when David Top was looking for someone to run the business, and David entrusted FJ to basically take what back then was Top Telecom and what today we know as TracFone. FJ launched TracFone into what many people doubt at the beginning. It was about selling prepaid phones and airtime credit. There weren't any phone contracts or credit checks back then with FJ, and it was the first time that consumers were actually able to prepay for airtime, data, and services that they needed. He defied all odds. I remember going back to when TracFone was starting to grow, and very few people believed in prepaid. As a matter of fact, most people believed that prepaid was something that would work only in third world countries. Due to his vision, today the US market enjoys more than 75 million prepaid subscribers, and I still remember when people used to make fun of the concept of prepaid. This was an innovative concept before innovation was even a buzzword. FJ changed the wireless industry and defined prepaid wireless as we know it today. He eventually grew TracFone to be the largest MVNO with more than 25 million subscribers and over $7 billion in revenue. And also FJ was the one who had the vision of transforming the government Lifeline program for landline phones so it also includes cell phone service. And thanks to him today, more than 11 million people today enjoy the benefits of having the phone service they need to stay connected with their family members and the job opportunities that allow them to improve their lives. Unfortunately, we're in an industry that too often is complicated and frustrating for consumers. FJ believed in a much different approach. Keep it simple and make it affordable. He gave the convenience of being able to buy, activate, and use their devices as soon as someone purchased them. He was building an impressive legacy, but it wasn't only money, power, or attention that he was chasing. The goal that motivated FJ more than anything else throughout his career was the satisfaction of helping others. He took pride in being able to provide reliable services on affordable devices for everybody, regardless of their age, where they lived, or how much money they had. Another remarkable thing about FJ that few people know is how devoted he was to giving back to others. FJ was a big supporter of education and connectivity for children here in the United States and Latin America. I saw how deeply moved he was when last year he accepted the Corporate Social Responsibility Award from Maestro Cares. Maestro Cares supports children who are in desperate need of help. They've done an incredible job of building orphanages in Latin America and to provide children a safe place to live and support people who care about them. And FJ was a really big contributor to that cause. He believed in giving everyone a fair shot. He and his wife generously devoted their time and support to many charities and meaningful causes. FJ was a tremendous leader in our industry, and he truly was a great person. I can't think of anyone more deserving of being inducted into the Wireless Hall of Fame. So we're going to watch a quick video about FJ.
Frederick John Pollak, or FJ, was born in Chicago, Illinois. He had an entrepreneurial mind and started his first business when he was 16. He attended Rutgers University in New Jersey and moved to Miami in the 1980s. His legacy in the wireless world began in 1996. FJ Pollak, along with David Top of Top Telecom, was the co-founder, president, and chief executive officer of TracFone Wireless Incorporated. Mr. Pollak had a vision to make wireless service and devices accessible to everyone. Budget-conscious families, senior citizens, and those with little to no credit history were neglected by the big carriers. Through Mr. Pollak's vision, these underserviced audiences could now afford the benefits of constant connectivity through reliable wireless service and affordable devices. Mr. Pollak developed a proprietary technology that allows customers to prepay for airtime, data, and service as needed. The company pioneered the prepaid wireless space, and TracFone Wireless became the first to offer wireless service and phones without contracts or credit checks. FJ took his first 18 months as CEO to travel the country and negotiate single-handedly contracts with all 71-plus wireless carriers. In 1999, FJ was instrumental in the negotiations for a major capital infusion for TracFone with Mexico's América Móvil, a leading provider of wireless services in Latin America. As part of his vision to change people's lives through technology, FJ went to the U.S. government and suggested that they take Ronald Reagan's Lifeline program, a program that provided subsidized landline phone service to those who couldn't afford regular service, and give the subsidy discount to TracFone, who would then give customers a free mobile phone and a set number of minutes. The government agreed, and SafeLink was born, and has changed the lives of millions of people. TracFone has now grown into the nation's largest MVNO, with more than 25 million subscribers and $7 billion of revenue. Through a marriage of simplicity, affordability, and distribution, the family of TracFone brands delivers on Mr. Pollak's vision of a cell phone for anyone and everyone. Mr. Pollak's passions included golf and philanthropy. Mr. Pollak, along with his wife Abigail, contributed to numerous causes and charities. In February of 2016, FJ Pollak was awarded the Corporate Social Responsibility Award by the Maestro Cares charity, which benefits homeless and neglected children in developing Latin American countries. In 2014, FJ Pollak was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and battled the disease for 18 months before finally succumbing on April 3, 2016, at the age of 53. He is survived by his wife Abigail and their 3 children, Jonathan, Matthew, and Abigail Marie, as well as by his daughters, Emma and Megan.
I'll tell you, he never ever hid what his agenda was. This is where I'm trying to go. This is where, if you want to play, this is what it's going to take. And I always respected him. And the best part, and the reason I miss the guy a lot, is that we became really good friends while doing this.
What he did changed the course of wireless forever. And I know we'll all miss his hunger to make this industry better. And I hope to honor his memory, at least in some small way, in how we approach our business every day.
He will ever carry a fond place in my heart and a rightful place in the industry for his determination and his sheer capability to make some great things happen.
FJ's leadership at CTIA and throughout the wireless world set a great example for all of us. We're very pleased to see this great leader inducted into the Wireless Hall of Fame today.
So, above everything else, as you've seen, family came first in FJ's life. He was an amazing husband. In Abby, he found a tremendous partner. I saw them work together as a couple, as a lot of us have here, and they were able to do amazing things together. But I think above anything were his 5 kids. Emma, who's 19, Megan, who's 18, Jonathan, 11, Matthew, 9, and Abby, 7. When FJ was surrounded by his kids, there would be a different FJ, a person who always let his guard down. As you saw, another one of great passion of FJ was definitely the game of golf. And for those of you who know him, he basically taught his kid when he was 2 years old to start playing golf. And FJ's biggest passion was actually being his kid's caddy while he was traveling around the world, taking him to play golf. So please join me in welcoming Abigail Pollak to the stage to accept this award on his behalf.
Tonight we recognize that FJ accomplished his dreams, and he was able to inspire so many people with his success. On behalf of my children and I, thank you so much for honoring him and for remembering him. Thanks.
I absolutely loved working on cellular, and I thought what we were doing was important, but I don't do it. I have a cell phone. I did not own a cell phone until about 5 years ago.
I'm not as bad as Dick, but almost. Okay, that phone is probably turned off 99% of the time.
I only use it for talking. I don't carry it.
Occasionally, I'll check the stock market, and I do use the camera.
It was a lovely thing to work on, but I don't especially want one.
Please welcome Wireless Hall of Fame member Dale Hatfield of the University of Colorado Boulder.
Thank you so much for the warm reception. It's an honor for me to be here this evening as we pay tribute to three giants in technical developments of wireless networks based upon the cellular principles: Joel Engel, Richard Frenkiel, and Philip Porter. Like so many others in this room, I am fortunate to be able to personally attest to the importance of their contributions to the amazing progress and growth in the wireless industry. In my case, in the early 1960s, I began my own technical career in what we called back then land mobile radio and radio telephony. That is when I went to work at the old Central Radio Propagation Laboratory in Boulder. The position at CRPL eventually led me to a series of government policy analysis and policy making positions in the Office of Telecommunications Policy in the White House, the Federal Communications Commission, and then the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. I left my government policy-making roles in 1982 before returning again to the FCC in 1997 when I worked for Bill Kennard. But the point is, my first tenure in government policy analysis and development roles spanned the period during which critical decisions were being made about the future of the land mobile radio industry in general, and in the cellular mobile radio in particular. In FCC proceedings in dockets 18261, some of you remember 1862, and later on 79-319, we in government were struggling with questions like whether and how much spectrum should be reallocated from UHF television to land mobile radio, and within the mobile radio category, how spectrum should be divided among the systems operated on a private carrier or common carrier basis. Indeed, even within the common carrier category, there were significant skirmishes between the wireline common carriers and the radio common carriers. But much of the heavy lifting in terms of identifying and analyzing technical alternatives, in terms of establishing design principles and selecting architectures, in terms of defining parameters and specifications for these systems, and finally, in terms of conducting field tests to demonstrate the feasibility of the basic cellular concept. That heavy lifting, much of it was done at Bell Labs by this evening's technology honorees. Their accomplishments are described in more detail in the written material you have before you and in the video you are about to see. But let me personalize this a little bit through a single example. One of the many questions we were struggling with inside government once the basic allocation for cellular had been made was how many systems should be licensed per market. On the one hand, we wanted to assign enough spectrum per licensee to allow them to achieve reasonable economies of scale. That argued for larger amounts of spectrum per license and hence fewer licensees. On the other hand, we wanted enough individual licensees to increase competition and thereby drive down costs and stimulate innovation. It was in working on questions like this one that led to my own close familiarity and contact with the work of Bell Labs and our technology inductees. The results of their seminal technical and economic research on cellular radio was essential in answering such questions. Thus, I can personally attest to the foundational nature and importance of Joel Engel's, Dick Frenkiel's, and Phil Porter's contribution to the wireless field. They were my technical heroes in those days, and they remain among my all-time technical heroes today. Could I have the clip, please?
I was born in 1936, right at the height of the Depression. I grew up in New York City in the Bronx.
Born in Brooklyn, went to Brooklyn Technical High School, went off to Tufts University to become a mechanical engineer.
I went to the City College of New York. There were about a dozen of us who graduated engineering school at City College at roughly the same time, and we all went up to MIT.
I got a job at Bell Labs. I really knew nothing about Bell Labs, but people told me, well, if you can get a job there, you have to go there.
So I went to Bell Labs, and while I was at Bell Labs, I pursued a PhD.
For me, the big moment was about 2 years into being at Bell Labs. There was a reorg, and I got called into my new department head's office, and he said he wanted me to work on this radio system. The downside of that was that I didn't know anything about radio at all. The upside was I got to work with Phil Porter. Phil was older than I was by about a dozen years maybe. He was an experienced engineer, an electrical engineer and physicist, PhD. He was a Southern gentleman. He was a Kentucky gentleman. He really taught me everything. We started this work in January of '66, and we spent probably 6 months on the first proposal. We wrote a memorandum describing the system and its economics and how big cells should be and stuff like that. And really nobody cared in '66.
All of a sudden, out of the blue, the Federal Communications Commission opened up a docket that said, you know, we're thinking of taking a big chunk of spectrum from what was called UHF television and assigning to mobile telephone, but we don't want you to have this brute force system of a one antenna broadcasting 25 and 30 miles. We want something more sophisticated than that. The great Bell Laboratories could not respond and say, we don't know. They had to respond with something, and what they said to the FCC was, we really need to study this.
And we were the two guys at Bell Labs who knew what the system could look like. And so we spent months going around the company giving talks about it, and everyone wanted to hear about cellular.
And so I got promoted. Dick and Phil and a few other people were put into my group, which grew over a couple of years. And the end product was the report, which covered everything. It covered the radio aspects, it covered the switching and control aspects, it looked at the economics. I was the editor of that report.
My one big individual contribution to cellular was about how the system would grow. You have to start these systems with big cells because you can't afford to put in hundreds of cells. But as it grows, the cells have to get smaller. And all the original proposals would suddenly have a new size of cell, half the radius, would appear. And it still required dozens of new cells all at once. And then one day, I suddenly had this idea by sharing coverage between the two sizes of cell at the same place at the same time, you could actually make a very gradual growth happen. When I described it to people, they said, well, it can't be. It can't be that easy. And it was. Phil's big idea in around 1970 was to use directional antennas on the towers.
Not in the center, which is what everybody thought it would be, but at the corners aiming inward. And it allowed us to use the same frequency much closer together so that we could carry many more conversations per square mile.
I remember him coming into my office and saying, you know, we should not be giving dial tone to people. We should dial offline, and then when it's all ready, send that dialed number into the system. Because we're wasting about 15 seconds of channel time on every single call. So he invented dial send, which billions of people now treat as the normal way a cell phone works.
There was a lot of political back and forth going on, and it actually took the FCC 12 years before they actually allowed the system to be built and sold to the public. But they did allow a test system in Chicago, which grew substantially and proved in all of the technology aspects. It also proved in the market acceptance.
When you look at the whole system, it was a technological system, and you had to understand the economics. How many channels did you need to make the cost come out right? Things like that. I was good at that. I was good at putting together disparate ideas. So I made a role for myself.
I believed that the technology was right over the horizon. And Bell Labs was the kind of place where if you were passionate about an idea, they'd give you the resources you needed.
Phil Porter is the great unsung hero of cellular. His contributions are second to no one's. And yet, somehow over the years, Joel Engel and I have gotten a bunch of nice recognition. And Phil didn't. Phil should have been there with us for the National Medal of Technology, for the Draper Prize. Phil was nominated posthumously for this recognition by people he worked with 40 years ago. So they knew, and we all knew that he hadn't been recognized properly for his tremendous contributions. So the fact that those people came out to do that, it really says it all.
With that, I would now like to welcome to the stage Dick Frenkiel, Flip Porter, and Shelby Taylor to accept the 2016 Wireless Hall of Fame Technology Awards.
That was a lovely introduction. I hate to spoil it by speaking. I'd like to start with a few thank yous. A thank you to Dale, not for the introduction, but for prodding the FCC 35 years ago into doing something. And I'd like to thank the foundation, of course, for this honor, but also for preserving the history that we all care about. And I'd like to thank Liz for putting this together and the meticulous choreography. And I'd say more about all that, but I now only have 93 seconds left. So, those of us who worked on cellular back then from 2 of us in 1966 to 200 of us a decade later, we knew that we had the best job in Bell Labs. If you think about it, we were designing an entire telephone network, like inventing the system over again, with 1,000 fascinating questions that we got to answer. And we had a great team, a team that liked working together. In fact, a bunch of us still get together for lunch a few times a year, 40 years after all this happened. And we were able to have this sense that we were doing something that was important. Now, we certainly didn't know how important it would get to be. And I would like to say that there are many people in this room who made it that important. So this has been a labor of love for many, many years. I'd like to just express our gratitude for this. It is, having been a part of such a big team, it's very special to be recognized individually. For me personally, to be recognized at last with Phil Porter, who did so much to make cellular happen and who did so much for me personally. I won't even try to put that into words, but I have asked his son Flip to share this moment with me.
Thank you, Mr. Frenkiel. I have literally known him my entire life. I will say that I wish my father had a utility patent on the send and end button. I'm not bitter about that. Walter Isaacson's current book, The Innovators, has 11 chapters. None of them deal with what is being honored today. Cells, cell phones, wireless, spectrum, not a mention. Telephones are given a passing glance on 2 pages out of 550. I literally grew up with wireless. My kindergarten carpool included the pre-Kodak and pre-Motorola George Fisher child. I don't even remember if it was a boy or a girl. And Bob Wilson before he won the Nobel Prize. 40 years ago around the Porter table, fantastical tales of kids getting telephone numbers as they were born, like a social security number. Countries giving up landlines, jumping landlines, going to cellular, just skipping it all together. Dick Tracy phones, they were not beyond the realm of possibility. Nobody at school believed when I was talking about these things because nobody knew what a cell phone was. For a book focused on the creation of the digital revolution and the information age, to overlook the continuing ascendancy of wireless technology is a slight as well as an oversight. My father was a kind and humble man. He looked like and had the humor of Bob Newhart. He would have loved to have been here tonight. In a journal he made for each grandchild, he wrote, "I lay awake the other night thinking about all the improbable events that have profoundly changed my charmed life. Being alive, adopting Flip and Shelby, being married to Louise for over 15 years, being assigned to cellular, and the fact that several of my initial ideas, though significantly different from the original analog plan, are still in current systems. Have a happy life. Keep your powers of critical appraisal, your bravery and your honesty sharp and polished. My mother, sister, and I and our families thank the Wireless History Foundation, and especially thank my father's friends and colleagues who nominated him for induction. Congratulations to all the past and current and future winners who are involved in writing this never-ending chapter. Thank you.
There was a particular meeting I had with the Minister of Telecommunications. His people were dipping their hands into our pot. He got really angry because we accused him of theft. But we had the evidence. And we're sitting in this beautiful office, and he pulls out his gun. And he said, "Are you sure that you want to threaten me?" And I said, "Nope." Anyway, we got our money back. But that's the kind of environment we were in on a continuing basis.
And now, Wireless Hall of Fame member Wayne Perry, Chairman of the World Scout Foundation and the CEO of Shotgun Investments.
Well, today we're all part of this wonderful industry that's sophisticated, got enormous cash flows, actually admired. Wasn't always like this, wasn't always that way at all. I'd like to tell you a little tale of the thrilling days of yesteryear and about a different Lone Ranger, Dick Sherwin. You'll see a video after this, and Dick worked for a company called Graphic Scanning. And Graphic Scanning had used what is basically a very aggressive designated entity structure to apply for 700 low-band paging applications. The problem was the FCC's DE rules weren't adopted for years later. These were highly scammed type applications, and the FCC went at them very aggressively. The FCC in what was called the ASD litigation put at risk all of Graphic Scanning's licenses. Now, Graphic Scanning was the only company in the history of our industry to apply for all licenses, all cellular licenses. So they were an enormously large player in the industry. And for the FCC to threaten all of their licenses, not just their paging licenses, which they did revoke, which by the way turned out to be quite worthless, but also their cellular licenses, this was a big deal. Many in the telecommunications industry absolutely hated Graphic Scanning. And then Dick Sherwin arrives as the representative of Graphic Scanning. Folks, this was like being the political outreach officer for ISIS. It was not an easy task. To say that Dick started from a deep hole is a substantial understatement. But he was the representative, the sole representative, the largest cellular applicant that we had. Dick went to work. He was very active in the top 30 markets. He, along with Carl Robert Aaron, negotiated the landmark and trend-setting agreement with the Ericsson Company with respect to the Detroit license, a contract that we all used as a template from then on out. He negotiated that contract with Ericsson's Mats Junglund. Mats once told me, he said, "Dick Sherwin is a very tough negotiator. He is from New Jersey. I think he is with the mob." But it was very classic for those who dealt with Dick. Mats Lundgren became a lifelong friend of Dick Sherwin's. The FCC had a huge problem back then. The top 30 markets were all filed on a comparative hearing basis. We filed applications this big, and then we attacked our 6 other applicants, say, in a market like San Francisco. We'd file this much attacking each of them, then we'd file rebuttals of this much on each. Think about this. Pretty soon, you required something like the Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse just to hold the paper. That was when a market like San Francisco had approximately 6 applicants. Boston 2, Chicago, I think 3. What did you do when your markets 91 through 120 had 5,200 applications? The FCC had to retroactively decide that they were going to go, that they wanted us to do it by lottery. Now, the FCC had a huge problem here. They did not know if they could legally do this. So they were hoping that we would do what we could achieve, which was to settle this market, all these markets together. This happened right as the time of the cellular civil war. Now I look out there and I see a lot of you don't know there was a cellular civil war. There was definitely a cellular civil war. The Grand Alliance was warring with Cellular System 1, headed by John Stanton and Dick Sherwin. This was Movshin versus Edelman. This was brother against brother type stuff. This was nasty. But then came Dick Sherwin, the most unlikely of peacemakers, if you know Dick. But Dick was incredibly instrumental in negotiating the full market settlements, and all of them were achieved. The FCC in this situation acted as Sergeant Schultz, the old movie Hogan's Heroes. I know nothing. We went in a room and You traded pieces. You had premature transfers of control, inappropriate taxes, no public notice. We didn't have tax certificates because they didn't qualify for 1031. There were so many FCC rules violated if this thing hadn't been successful, but it was successful. And a lot of that is because of Dick Sherwin. These settlements were incredibly important to our industry to moving forward, which leads us to what I think was Dick's finest hour. George Lindemann decided that he had a piece of the Sacramento telephone company, which we called SACTO back then, and he owned one interest in SACTO. Well, he went in and he then proceeded to trade 3 pieces away. One to Whitey Blueston at MCI, one to John Stanton at McCaw, and one to Graphic Scanning. Folks, this exploded the settlements. This was like a gunfight at Appomattox Courthouse. I mean, it was going to end the whole settlement. And Dick said, I will undertake to solve this problem. And because we trusted Dick, the settlements were sustained and everything went forward. And it went on from then. Peace was restored because of Dick Sherwin. I could tell you Dick Sherwin stories all night long. I know a lot of you out there know Dick Sherwin stories. We could be here till breakfast and that would just be those in which the statute of limitations has expired. But Dick was incredibly important. And I could tell you the story, but the outcome was always the same. Enemies and adversaries became lifelong friends. No one played a more critical role in bringing peace and settling our industry at an incredible time. Many of you in this room have never heard of Dick Sherwin. Those of us who were blessed to be at the start of this industry know how much you owe and how much we all owe to Dick Sherwin. And now we'll see a highly sanitized version of a video of Dick Sherwin's life.
I was born in Brooklyn 73 years ago. I went to high school at Brooklyn Tech and then subsequently went to Rensselaer for my bachelor's in electrical engineering. And then I went to City College at night for a master's in business administration, which I never completed because I didn't do my thesis. I did that while I was working for IBM. I started as a systems engineer and eventually went into marketing management and then left and joined a company called Graphic Scanning. The guy who led Graphic Scanning, his name was Barry Ample, was a brilliant guy. Barry made a conscious decision to file for every one of the top 120 markets. So the first 30 were the largest 30. Graphic Scanning was the only company that filed for all 30 markets, and it was a brilliant move. I was still running 3 divisions of the company. I joined the team that worked on the cellular side in late 82, early 83. At the same time, at night, we were putting together the applications for all the markets. It was about that time that I joined and started to work among various parties to see how we might settle the market. And the reason that we, graphic people, wanted to settle the market was because there was a side issue. A group of paging companies had filed a lawsuit of FCC rule violations against Graphic Scanning in the way in which it had filed for the low-band applications in radio paging. With that hanging over our heads, the likelihood of our winning applications was slim. I had had some relationship with some of the people in the industry up until that point. Essentially what happened was I became involved in a relationship with a range of people. We sort of figured out that it would benefit everybody if we could settle markets. So it was a group of us, maybe 5 or 6 of us, that worked this out to compromise in every way. One of the reasons that we as a group, the 6 or 7 of us, were successful was because we had the trust of a lot of people. You're talking 300 to 400 different people, different players. And we had the trust of those people in negotiating the settlement process that we had because they believed in us and they believed we could get it done. What happened with Graphic was a bunch of arbitrageurs came in and started buying up Graphic stock and attempted to oust Barry Ample, and they were successful. But they settled, and out of that settlement, I became chief operating officer and I sat on the board of Graphic Scanning. They wanted to sell off all the assets, and I said that's a mistake. They terminated me. I sold my stock at about $8 a share. They eventually sold the entire company to Bell South for $5.25 a share. In the spring of 1990, somebody gave me the idea that I should go to the former Soviet Union. The wall had just come down in November of '89. They said, you know, they're in need of a whole bunch of services. Over the course of 10 years, we developed services which included cable television services, radio paging services. Of course, that went by the boards when cellular became available. But we also built 2 massive country cellular systems, one in Latvia and one in Georgia. In 1979, AT&T hired Lehman Brothers to do a study. The sum and substance of that study was that Lehman Brothers felt and reported to AT&T that they never thought that more than 1% of the population would ever use mobile phones. I knew in my heart, based upon discussions I had with a whole bunch of people, more than 10 to 20% of the population was eventually going to have this kind of service. I knew it in my heart of hearts. The last 25 years have been an absolute blast.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Lone Ranger of the wireless industry, Dick Sherwin.
Wayne's introduction invalidated my entire speech, so I'm going to shorten it. First of all, thank you all for being here. I want to thank Liz and Rob for what they've done to build this foundation and the Hall of Fame. I also want to thank my family and my friends, without whom this likely would never have happened. Within a few hours after I was notified that I had been nominated to be inducted into the Wireless Hall of Fame, I received an email from none other than Wayne Perry, telling me that there was some indication that I would be indicted for high crimes and misdemeanors for my conduct in the initial years of the cellular industry. You've already heard Wayne talk about some of that. Although he was kidding, I think, the initial years of this industry were characterized by, at least in my eyes, a substantial number of different views by a variety of different players. I use the word players loosely. This resulted in chaos, opposing views, and absolute craziness. In 1979, as you heard on the video, AT&T commissioned Lehman Brothers to perform a research study on the mobile telephone business. The great thinkers of this industry, like Lehman Brothers and Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette, who fashioned the Dick Tracy logo for cellular, at that time concluded that there would be not more than 1% penetration of mobile phones in the population of the United States for many years. Think about that and where we are today. Couple that with the way in which the industry was structured in those early days. As Wayne mentioned, the Federal Communications Commission decided upon establishing 2 potential operators in each market: the monopoly wireline company in the given market and a non-wireline entity in that market. At that time, there was usually only one wireline company and several non-wireline entities serving the market: paging companies, telecom companies, broadcasters. It became immediately apparent to some entrepreneurs that it would be a good move to associate, acquire, or become a paging or telecom company in all the top markets. Suddenly, all of the top markets had numerous companies in the paging business, many of which went through merger or acquisition. Entrepreneurs sprang out of the woodwork in the paging business with the idea of participating in the new cellular telephone business. These people had extremely diverse ideas, diverse objectives, and very different behavioral characteristics. The FCC observed what was going on with the first 30 markets with administrative law judges trying to decide what characterized the best application among all these non-wireline participants. Each administrative law judge had his or her own criteria for what was the best application. Although there were only an average of about 4 applicants per market, as Wayne mentioned, it was a very long, drawn-out process. The wireline companies had sliced and diced up the markets with the power of their monopolies so that each knew what markets they would operate and serve and could get into business very quickly, thus causing a major disadvantage to the non-wireline entities. The time-to-market advantage to the wirelines caused a series of negotiations on the non-wireline segment to avoid the arbitrary judging process and the potential legal wranglings that would ensue that would leave the wirelines with a dominant position in every market. Like in a high-stakes poker game, each non-wireline applicant stressed its advantage in its application. Oh, mine's got more cells, mine's got a better application, I've got a better marketing study. And essentially, when they stressed that advantage, they would negotiate what percentage they would have in each market and what the application was worth. Nobody really knew the application's worth. It was like playing with a deck of cards with no numbers and no faces. In some of the top 10 markets, the applicants merged and they received a quick license award. After the top 30 markets, the FCC decided to establish lotteries for each market rather than pursuing the judging process. Under the new rules, anyone could file an application in a market, and if it passed muster, that entity could participate in the lottery. Out of this chaotic situation, there emerged a set of people who felt they could structure the situation so that most, if not all, participants in the business would be satisfied. Among those extremely perceptive people were Craig McCaw, John Stanton, Wayne Perry, John Kluge, Stuart Sabatnik, Carl Aaron, many others. They developed a strategy that was ultimately implemented from a legal standpoint by Larry Movshin and Barry Edelman, Barry and Larry, which stood the legal test of time at the FCC. There were hundreds of applicants for markets 31 to 90. And if we didn't get all the participants to agree to the structure, the entire non-wireline industry beyond the 30th market would likely crumble. It was a high-wire act without a net because many of us had not enough capital to last any kind of period of time. This approach caused a massive set of trading sessions, as Wayne mentioned, like a game of high-stakes Monopoly, in which each market was valued on its population, each applicant in each market had an equal slice of that market. Trading of slices ensued in this smoke-filled room at Rubenbaum, Levin, Constant, and Friedman in New York City. The objective of most applicants was to accumulate all or a number of shares in a given market to own the market, and therefore establish additional value through control. There were times I felt like I was cast in the Broadway show, The Producers. Wayne mentioned Sacto. At one point, we had traded for a share of the Sacramento market in the morning, only to find that after a liquid lunch, the same individual traded his share of Sacramento again, and again, and again. The entire process almost crumbled. Or how about this? What does a cellular carrier pay for frequencies in today's environment? Millions? Hundreds of millions? How about billions? Right? Ralph? Billions. What did we pay back then? Gantz. Zero. All we did was have an application. Obtaining cellular frequencies back then only required an approved application. That's why we strove for a single application in a market for the FCC to consider. I am honored to be inducted into this group of some 40-plus people who helped structure the industry, making it grow and expand and become what it is today, with just about 100% penetration in the United States, nearly 100 times the Lehman assessment. I leave you with one last thought about these people in this Wireless Hall of Fame. Think about what the iPhone or the Android would be, or whether there would even be such devices without the portable cell phone invention of Marty Cooper, one of the early inductees. I find it humbling to be associated with these individuals who made major contributions to establish this industry. Thank you very much.
Ralph was the one who formed the initial relationship with Steve Jobs, and that happened over a device that nobody ever talks about, which was called the rocker.
The rocker was a failure.
Steve picked up the phone to call somebody he trusted in the industry, and that was Ralph.
Sometimes in your career you have small failures, but it's that small failure that led to this super huge win that dramatically changed the industry.
100 tunes in your phone, baby.
Hello, Moto.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Chairman and CEO of AT&T, Randall Stephenson.
Thank you. The rocker, Ralph, I was just sitting there watching that thinking, I remember when everybody was asking, what are you guys going to do after the razor? The industry's going to fall apart, right? Do you remember that? It's great to be here and honor one of tonight's inductees, Ralph de la Vega, who happens to be one of my dearest friends. I was reflecting as I was preparing for this tonight. The first time I ever met Ralph, it was at Singular Wireless, and I was serving as chairman of Singular Wireless at that time. And Singular Wireless, if you didn't know it, was a joint venture between Bell South and SBC. And now, Singular, Bell South, SBC, none of those companies exist anymore. But Ralph had been appointed as COO of Singular Wireless. And I'd never met this guy. I didn't know who he was, and he'd been in Latin America running the properties for Bell South down there. And so I asked the Bell South guy, I said, who is this guy? Tell me about him. And Bell South had this CFO who was this crusty old guy named Ron Dykes. And Ralph, I don't know if you know it or not, but Ron told me, he said, Ralph never fails to surprise. This guy just makes it happen. That's what he said about you. Now, as you know, any of you who knew Ron knew he threw around compliments like manhole covers, right? He didn't do that. And so to hear him talk about Ralph this way, I'm thinking, wow, this guy must be something special. And sure enough, I've worked with Ralph now in a lot of capacities. He was COO of Singular, then we made him CEO of AT&T Mobility. Now he's CEO of AT&T Business Solutions, and he's vice chairman of AT&T. And after 15 years of working very, very closely with this guy, I would give you my assessment. It goes something like this. Ralph never fails to surprise me. This guy just makes it happen. I mean, I think Dykes nailed it. That's what Ralph does. And if you want to put his career into perspective, when he took that job as COO, Singular Wireless had about $20 billion in revenues. Over Ralph's 10 years of running that business, it's now over $70 billion of revenues. That's quite a feat, Ralph. I would say Ralph's business bio is very much a mirror image of his personal bio, and you'll hear a little bit about his personal bio on these videos tonight. But what Ralph is really good at is taking really tough situations and turning tough situations into growth experiences. And I've seen him do this more times than I can count. AT&T Wireless. We acquired AT&T Wireless. This was a business that was not doing well. It was bleeding customers. We closed the deal. It immediately turns to growth. I mean, almost overnight became a growth business. We acquired a couple of years ago Cricket Wireless. You've heard of this. We did it to get into the prepaid business. It was bleeding customers. Within months, Cricket Wireless was growing, and it's now one of the fastest growing prepaid businesses around. We bought a couple of Mexican wireless companies last year. Both of these Mexican wireless companies were bleeding customers. Today, under Ralph's guidance, these two businesses are the fastest growing mobile business in Mexico. When we bought DirecTV, we had a Latin American business that's now under Ralph, selling TV in Latin America, the largest pay TV provider down there. If you didn't notice, Latin America is a tough place to do business right now. It's tough to grow. In fact, it's tough to even grow coffee in Latin America right now. Last quarter, our Latin American business under Ralph grew. I hope you're starting to discern a trend here, because there is a trend here. What this guy does is very unique. I mean, people, who does this, right? In Texas, we'd say that's highly irregular. And I often marvel and wonder at what Ralph does.
What is it about this guy? And I think that Dykes got it right. This guy just makes it happen. But I was watching a movie the other night about Alan Turing, and he had a quote that I think sums up Ralph perfectly. He said, "Sometimes it's the people no one can imagine anything of who do the things no one can imagine." This guy's unassuming, he's modest, he's humble, he's really, really smart, and he's always ready to deflect credit and give praise to those that are around him rather than take it upon himself. His personal story is an inspiring story, as you're going to hear, but most importantly, what I admire about Ralph is he moved up the world of corporate America. He didn't pull the ladder up behind him. In fact, he's constantly working to give people the same advantages that he's had. He's trying to make sure that the next Ralph de la Vega enjoys the American dream the way Ralph has. He's chaired Junior Achievement for like 4 years. He's involved in the Boy Scouts National Board. He's on the Board of Trustees of Morehouse College. He's an amazing individual, not only what he's contributed to this industry, but what he continues to give back to the people in his communities. And I would tell you the thing that I have grown to most admire and love about Ralph is the woman sitting here next to him, Maria, his wife. Maria, you shared this man with our industry and with this world, and I would say both are better for it. We're very grateful. And Ralph, I want to give everybody an appreciation for what you've done with this video, so if you wouldn't mind watching this.
I was born in Cuba. I came to the United States at the age of 10 by myself. So I found myself in a new country, didn't speak a word of English, didn't have a penny in my pocket, and I didn't even like the food. When I went to see a guidance counselor in high school, and he looked at my family's finances, which were non-existent. Instead of advising me to become an engineer, which was my dream, he said, "Son, you should be a mechanic instead." My grandmother was a school teacher and a poet, and a pretty spunky lady as well. So when I told her that I really wanted to be an engineer, she said, "Ralph, don't let anybody put limitations on what you can achieve." And I did a Control-Alt-Delete on that counselor's advice, went to college, got my engineering degree, and the rest is history. The true measure of a leader is one who can take a team and get them to achieve things that they thought would be impossible to do. I've been fortunate to have been in the right time, in the right place, when teams really yell and deliver something that nobody thought was possible. The first time that it happened to me, it was when I was leading our operations in Bell South, Latin America. We were the startup wireless provider in 11 different countries, and the company had never made money.
We had different partners in different countries, all with different individual issues. And he had to get them all on the same page before he got his management team on the same page.
In a year, that team turned the company positive.
I was delighted when Latin America finally became profitable on a reliable basis.
When we were working on the AT&T wireless, Singular Wireless merger, it's at the time the largest all-cash merger in the history of the US. People would tell us that we were going to lose customers going through the critical busy season, which is the Christmas holiday season. The team delivered the greatest number of customer net additions in a quarter in the history of the wireless industry at the time.
Ralph was really the guy architecting that whole merger. It was just incredible, and me coming into it from the other side was blown away by what this team had put together, and then started to understand that really it was Ralph. It was Ralph's leadership driving that.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
The iPhone and the smartphone was quite a phenomenon that Ralph was in the forefront in the leadership of that.
Nobody thought that the iPhone would be that huge of a success, but we had a team that worked very closely with Apple to make sure that that was a great product, and it exceeded everybody's expectations, and the world is a different place as a result. So the smartphone revolution is something that I think I would really treasure.
No one should be given more credit for the iPhone than Ralph de la Vega.
I'm very passionate about helping young people achieve their full potential. So I've worked very closely with organizations like Junior Achievement Worldwide, with the Boy Scouts of America, all focusing on the aspects of helping youth understand about entrepreneurship, about financial literacy, getting ready for the workforce, and to learn the right values in the case of the Boy Scouts on how to lead your life.
He has always cared about kids. We would bring young people over to Bell South and then later to AT&T to shadow employees. He's done amazing things for kids in this country through Junior Achievement.
When you look at the amazing success that Ralph's had, and you look at how he treats people, it just hasn't changed. I mean, he is a very humble individual, even with his great success. And then when you're around him, I think it makes you want to be the same way.
I feel very honored about being inducted into the Hall of Fame. I'm also here not because of my individual accomplishments, but because of the accomplishments of the teams that I have been privileged to work with throughout my career, and because of the mentors that I've had.
I'm extremely delighted that he is going to get this recognition because Ralph has earned it, and he is a good man.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Ralph de la Vega to the Hall of Fame.
Why don't you take your iPad with you here? Well, it's been an incredible evening, ladies and gentlemen. Randall, I want to thank you for those really kind words. You know, I'm so honored that you would take time out of your schedule to introduce me tonight. I can't even begin to express my appreciation. I can't tell you how much I respect you for your leadership, for your courage, and for your generosity. But what I value most about the man is his friendship. Over the many years that we've worked together, you've managed to give me opportunities that are unbelievable. And quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, opportunities that have probably led to one of the most improbable journeys to the Wireless Hall of Fame ever. I also want to thank the many AT&T executives that are here, especially the AT&T executive team that is here in these many tables. They're an incredibly talented team, a talented team of individuals that I've had the honor to work with a number of years, and that I'm very proud to call my friends. So thank you guys for being here for me tonight. I also want to recognize mentors like Dwayne Ackerman, who you saw in the film, and Stan Sigmund, who is a one-of-a-kind, and who, like Randall, provided me with incredible opportunities and support and encouragement along the way. You know, I like to say that opportunities are often disguised as obstacles. And I can tell you that the opportunities that Dwayne, Stan, and Randall provided me were often very well disguised. But they were always there, waiting for the right team to seize them and to make a difference. Teams like the Bell South Latin America team, teams like the Singular Wireless team, the AT&T Mobility team, and the Apple team with whom we collaborated to really launch the smartphone revolution, and to thank Eddie Q, who's here from Apple tonight, even though he's having a big kickoff tomorrow morning, for that collaboration, Eddie. You made a huge difference. Thank you very much. Like you saw in the film, I am not here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, because of my individual accomplishments. I'm here because I've been privileged to work with some great teams over the years that have had incredible accomplishments throughout the years, including my current business solutions and international team. So I am incredibly humbled and honored to accept this recognition, not on my own individual behalf, but on behalf of the great teams that are all around here represented tonight. Thank you very much, guys, for the great things that you've been able to do to get me to this podium tonight. The journey to this podium is a journey of courage, of sacrifice, of hard work, of determination, and an unwavering belief in a better future. My journey, and I would like to call it my improbable journey, to this podium began on July 1st of 1962. As you heard in the video, I was born in Cuba, and after the revolution, my family lived in a state of constant uncertainty and anxiety, and the freedom that we had known was gone and replaced with intimidation and the confiscation of property. Food distribution was taken over by the government, so my father's business was gone. So my parents made the difficult decision to leave the country, guided by that beacon of hope, freedom, and opportunity that is the United States of America. But before my parents could leave Cuba, they had to agree to leave everything behind, every single material possession, our home, our savings, everything. We thought that was a tough decision that the family had to make. But as tough as that decision was, an even more difficult decision awaited us as the family was prepared to fly to the United States. You see, when we got to the Havana airport, the militiamen that looked at our exit papers said 5 words that changed my life and my family's life forever. And those 5 words were, "Only the boy can go." I was 10 years old. It turns out that only my papers were correct. My parents had to make an unimaginable choice right there to keep the entire family behind until everyone's papers were correct, or to send me ahead to the U.S. by myself. My father made a few calls to friends in Miami and decided to send me ahead. I thought we would be reunited in a few days. I got on that airplane and said goodbye to my parents, and I wouldn't see them again for 4 years. Those were 4 of the most difficult years in my life. I found myself in a new country, with a new family, the Baez family, a new language, new customs, and without a single penny in my pocket. And heck, I didn't even like the food. The first food I got in the United States was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I said to myself, I'm in the greatest country in the world, and they don't put meat in their sandwiches? Yet the human spirit is incredibly resilient. You can't start over again and reach your dreams. So leaving Cuba was the start of a journey that led me to serve as vice chairman of AT&T and to be inducted into the Wireless Hall of Fame. Improbable? Yes. Ironic? Absolutely. Especially when most people in Cuba still don't have access to wireless technology and the capability to speak freely. Improbable? No. Thanks to great mentors, committed teams, and the support of a great family. So now that you know about some of the sacrifices that my family made for me, you'll be able to appreciate the indescribable honor that it is for me tonight to accept your recognition in front of the people to whom I owe so much. First of all, my mom, Andrea de la Vega. She's here tonight with us, 87 years old. On that July 1st, she made the sacrifice to put her 10-year-old son on a plane alone in order to give him a chance for a better future. Such a tough decision that a few years ago when we were having Thanksgiving turkey and having dinner, I always carve the turkey, she comes to me and she says, "Ralph, did I do the right thing?" 40 years later. I said, "Mom, I think I turned out okay." My second mom, Ada Baez, is here. Ada is here. Ada and her husband became my second parents during the 4 years that it took for my parents to get from Cuba. And their 2 sons, Arnie and William, are like brothers to me. Arnie is here tonight all the way from Australia. So Arnie, thank you for being here for me. And my sister Barbara is here with us tonight, an amazing woman, a great executive, and a terrific mother. And of course, my wife Maria. Maria and I have been married now 40 years, and her love and support and understanding have held our family together over my many career moves and countless tough assignments, raising our two sons, Mark and David is here tonight as well. So Maria, thank you for your love. And like the video showed, I also want to thank my late grandmother, Julia Diaz, who at a critical time in my high school years had the courage to get me back on the right track by teaching me to never let anyone put limitations on what I could achieve. So now you know another key to my success. With 5 great Cuban women behind you, man, you can't lose. You cannot fail. So here's the bottom line is no one reaches success alone. In my case, I'm fortunate that I've had inspiring mentors. I've worked for a world-class company, AT&T, collaborating with exceptional teams in an industry that has changed the world. And to have the unconditional support of 5 incredible Cuban women. And one more thing. I am fortunate that my journey has brought me to a great country. I tell people that it has to be a great country that allows a 10-year-old boy to reach its shores without his family, without speaking the language, not a penny in his pocket, and to make it to the Wireless Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, I am living proof that the American dream is still alive. Thank you, Wireless Industry Foundation, for this incredible honor. Thank you, Liz and Rob. Thank you very much.
And now, to close the evening, Wireless Hall of Fame member Larry Mufshin of Wilkinson Barker Nauer.
Well, we've had quite an evening, haven't we? Terrific honorees tonight. We want to thank everyone. On behalf of the Wireless History Foundation, we want to thank everyone for being here tonight to help us honor these great inductees. We also particularly want to thank our sponsors and supporters. Without you, this dinner wouldn't occur, and more importantly, we wouldn't have the ability to continue to develop the history and retain the history of this great industry that we all enjoy being part of. I also want to recognize our staff, Liz, Linda, Martha, and Laura. I want to give them a big round of applause for putting this all together tonight. We want to remind you that we do this every year. Next year, we're moving to San Francisco with the CTIA and the GSM World Congress. We hope you'll join us then. It'll be the week of September 14th. And last, and certainly not least, I have the pleasure of reminding you that the party continues to honor our inductees. The bar is open back there. Thank you all for coming.